welcome to episode 477 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' bi-weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Zach Wilkerson, and I will be your host today. And we are here to dive into, I guess, sort of the second half of 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. It's a little more complicated than that. Obviously, if you've played, you understand why. Before we get into the wackiness that is this game, let me introduce the panel, starting with you, Aleks.
Unbelievable. I'm acting like an amateur.
Every time you said that, I was like, no, you're not. I just had to make a decision. It's okay.
Yeah, he's really hard on himself.
Yeah. And Ben Love.
Yakisoba pun.
You know, I actually, my wife made yakisoba pan a couple of days ago, and it was truly delicious.
Did it make you fall on your knees, and did you call it the food of the gods?
Yes, that's exactly what I did.
Oh my god, I gotta get my hands on that.
It's actually really good. I mean, it's like not healthy at all, but it's good. It's tasty. It's tasty. We are going to kind of dive straight in here in terms of the story. Last time we talked about sort of the first sort of 30%. We talked about some of the structural elements of it. We talked a lot about sort of the combat. We'll get a little bit into the combat here because I do think that it, ups itself in terms of challenge a little bit in the final wave.
Mm-hmm.
But
for sure.
I think that the easiest way to address this, listeners, so if you haven't played this game, just be aware that we are about to literally talk about the very end of this game. Because I think that's probably the easiest way to talk through the story of this game. Kind of start at the end and kind of work our way backwards. And there's just so much, and I think it would be hard to talk about it a different way. So those of you who've played know that at the very end of this game, after the big Sentinel fight, you discover, or at least you sort of already knew, I guess, I think, sort of, I don't remember exactly when some of the information is shared, that you are actually in a simulation, that all the characters in a simulation, and you are sort of a sequence of 15 clones. You're 13 protagonists, then 2 other characters, are a sequence of 15 clones. And you're probably I think there's some indication that you're the 300th clone. I think this is the 300th cycle. And it took me a minute to realize that they're kind of recycling bodies, I think. I don't know. We'll get into it. Then you, after you have the fight, which turns out was a thing that the original Shinonome introduced because she was upset about something that happened with Ida, but also lost faith in humanity. Anyway, you were basically there. The point of the simulation was to prepare you for terraforming. It was part of Project Ark, and you were going out after the world had sort of been destroyed by nanomachines, which the original Professor Chihiro created, or all the people all died to it. You were basically there in the simulation to prepare you to live on a new planet. And you get to do that at the very end of the game. You have a 5-year time leap, and it turns out that all these other people in the simulation are just AI, and there's all these loops, and there's a lot more detail than that, but that's sort of where we end. It's a very happy ending with, I think, as Aleks described it, as 7 Adam and Eves. There's actually, I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but there's a secret cutscene. I had to look it up. I don't know how you get to it. It's an indication that this also happened somewhere else. They sent out all these different pods, and these were not the only ones. And this is just one of the successes of Project Ark. There's another one as well. So anyway,
with different characters or the same characters?
I think it's the same DNA. I think it's basically it's the same set of 15 over and over again. And I don't know how many they sent out, but the indication is that this was not the only shot that humanity had to survive. Again, I looked that up later. I saw it on Wikipedia, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't even know how you access the cutscene. So anyway, that's the end. And so what are some things that I missed there in terms of what's happening, and then we can kind of work our way backwards?
Well, I mean, I think that encompasses a couple of regarding the stuff we talked about before. So that reveals one, that there's no time travel, right? So when they're time traveling, they're just going from different sectors, which I guess were set up as simulation habitats for each person or group of people. And I think the way that those were set up, based on some dialogue, is that the original people who created this project in 2188 or whatever, some of them were oh, I would want my clone to grow up in like this time period. And so it was like they were assigned these time periods based on like the preferences, I think, of the people who they are clones of. And then them like moving between time periods, I believe, is something that happened because of the issues with the simulation caused by like the Deimos code and all of that happening. Is then the data of everybody like moving between these like sectors that were lined out in the simulation, but they weren't actually supposed to cross over at all. Does that sound right to you guys?
Maybe.
Yeah. And I think just to add more context to that, I think like so all our characters are in these like what they call growth pods.
Hmm.
So their like actual bodies are being like preserved in these areas while the simulation is happening. I guess that's why they're naked in the robots, because they're actually just in this constrained space, like their actual bodies
Hmm.
are this
See, there
entire
was a
time.
reason.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there was a
and
reason.
there's no
Congrats,
cockpits,
Vanillaware.
and there's no mechs. Like all of that is completely like just inside the simulation. So they're really that's the growth pod, like that you see them in the whole time, which is interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
so Tamao Kurabe was the one who invented the growth pods, and
Hmm.
she seemed to be like kind of one of the more benevolent forces from like the 2188 like scientist crew, where like she just, I think part of the reason why there are these simulations of like different time periods was also like she wanted to prioritize the importance of like transferring culture and knowledge to
Oh
like
yeah.
the remaining of humanity. So by like representing all these different time periods, I mean it's not really super exhaustive of human history, but I guess she did the best she could. That like these characters will learn more about like what happened throughout history and be able to carry that forward to human civilization going forward, which is probably just going to be like a bunch of AI kind of generated people
Yeah,
from
is
my
there a reason
understanding.
why they decide like 40-year like sort of leaps? Did they ever discuss that? Like that they needed to be 45 and 85 and 2025?
Well, I
Like,
think those were just like points in that each cultural era. I also wouldn't be surprised if it was like related to, because in Japan, like at part of like they have time periods like designated by era, so it's like Showa era, Reiwa, whatever, right? So I'd imagine they're just like picking the point in time that most exemplifies each era, and then because this game was made like what in like 2019 or whatever, they're like Vanillaware is just doing a little bit of like, oh well, then this is when the new era is going to be, or the midpoint, or like a clear point within these future eras that will be happening that we're picking. That's kind of what I gathered from it, is like why they picked those periods, and I think they also like why they might not have picked later than, or earlier, I mean, than 1945 is like I think it was like focused on like Japanese like culture and society like post like immediately post war.
Mhm.
Um and they didn't really, I guess they didn't want to include like the pre-war the pre-war era for whatever reason. Maybe because of like technological development, so that's like Japan goes through a period of like heavy industrialization and technological development in like the 1930s and 40s, and then the post-war period. So I think like maybe thematically, like a company like Shikishima being kind of like the foundation of all of this stuff happening, those companies really came about from the war and immediate post-war era. And so that's, I think, why those time periods are chosen.
Yeah, I think it also just works for entertainment reasons, right? Like
Hmm.
having like the earliest period be like the end of World War II allows for some like pretty dramatic set pieces early on that we
Hmm.
discussed in that previous episode, like the whole idea of like Miura and uh what's his name? Long-haired guy, like being
Fujiyama.
from that period and
Fujiyama,
then
yeah.
like getting like culture shock from coming into 1985
Hmm.
is like an interesting thing. And then I know like I read that the writer Kawatani
George
like
Kamatani, yeah.
yeah, grew up in the 80s and, like, wanted to have all those, like, kinda 80s movie influences that are worked into, like, the whole thing with, like, VHS tapes and, like, memories
Hmm.
and how that relates to, like, the memories and dreams of the characters, because that's also a thing that's going on. Um, and then having like 2025 kind of be like a more contemporary period. I mean, we made it out. 2025, no apocalypse happened, so look at us.
Yeah, and I think too, like it's because the simulation in this entire project is kind of being spearheaded by like Shikishima, like this corporation. It makes sense that they would it makes sense because Shikishima is the ones who like put this whole project together, that they would align it with like their corporate history. So like they got their
Mm,
start like making ships for the war. And so then it makes sense that the starting point, the earliest starting point of like human culture would be their starting point.
Now that is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're like it's like the world according to this corporation and their corporate history, and of course they're going to put the highest level of importance on when they started and then
mm,
how they moved forward. And I think each point of the story is like or time period is where they made major like technological advances. The
yes.
Shikishima in particular. So that's kind of also how they pick, which is interesting because the game somewhat grapples with like the idea of like corporate like malfeasance, but I feel like that's kind of under explored a little bit
Yeah,
in
it
this
could
game.
have went harder for it, because like ultimately it's revealed that like Professor Morimura was responsible for like selling the technology on like nanomachines to like
Hmm.
Shikishima, who's like a corporate entity. She was influenced to do so by like an AI copy of the CEO from Shikishima, which is also Kenji Okada's dad. Oh my
Hmm.
god, saying these details out loud is kind of wild.
And
Uh,
then Goto is also like at some point the head of Shikishima as well, I believe. Uh, like he's like the chairman or something. Is it in like 2188 or something like that? I think. Is that right?
right,
Yeah.
yes. Wait, yeah, yeah. So Goto is the CEO of Shikishima. So who was
Well, he
Ogata's
might
dad
be
again?
chairman of the board, I
Okay,
think.
right.
Yeah. So they're both high like high in the company structure, but I think they're also like at cross purposes at some point, like the AI of Ogata and then Goto. I don't know that they're like fully aligned the entire time, if that makes sense.
I mean, I don't know if it does or not, but that's what happened.
Well, there's a
I mean,
lot of I mean, there's a lot of that, right? Like even Morimura is like doing things that like behind their back, but then also influenced by each of them. Um, yeah, there's like a lot of like stuff going on there, but which doesn't I don't know how like ultimately important all that is to the actual plot because a lot of like what they were trying to do ends up being like unsuccessful ultimately,
Hmm.
or relevant in like other loops, but not in the one that you're playing, I guess.
yeah, and I think that that actually gets to because I actually think like Chihiro in like her three, four different iterations if you include Iori, I guess. I don't know, man. There's a
Yeah.
lot of Chihiros here. I think that she ends up being one of the more interesting characters, but like I think that like all three of like the previous Chihiros are like significantly more interesting than Iori. I don't think Iori really, outside of I don't know, being sleepy and liking food and having this enormous crush on Sekigahara, has a lot going on. And I actually think that like because we're going to talk a lot, I'm sure, about like this is like there's like all these like sort of mind blowing reveals and things like that. But like I think that some of the storytelling is like really weird in the way that it's meted out, and we'll get to that. But I also think that because there's so many different versions and copies of these characters, sometimes that like my emotional investment was kind of blunted,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
in so like I think about like other narratives like this that have like really like I like the fact that it's not time travel, like I called that pretty early, but like I wasn't sure about the simulation, and I certainly wasn't sure about a lot of the details. In fact, a lot of the details I just kind of had to kind of look up afterwards, because I was like, what's going on there again? I think I kind of caught it, but my point is that like because I think of the fractured nature of all these characters, there's like two different, three different versions, four different versions of these characters in some cases, that like by the end I wasn't like super happy that they got out of the simulation or something. I was like, oh, okay, that's what happened. Cool. And so to me, when I'm comparing it to like other narratives that are sort of similar to this, like I felt like a really deep emotional investment in a lot of those characters. And so I think that for me, that's one of the issues with the game.
Yeah, I think some of that too is like the concept of what they're trying to do with the clones who are the ones like growing in the pods. I guess they're essentially supposed to be like blank slates that are informed by their experiences in the simulation. And so them coming into contact with these various versions of themselves, which isn't really supposed to happen, right? Like that wasn't really the design of the program. The design of the program is just for them to like have this like simulation of a normal life in their era, and then wake up, I guess, when they reach the terraform planet or whatever, right? So it does, I think, like the comparison between them because you're seeing like Morimura at these different stages or different versions of herself that are like way more interesting because they have way different experiences, and then she comparatively has like almost no experiences, right? But it's like, I guess that contrast is like kind of the point in a way. Like, I guess it's trying to show you like these are the ways that some of these characters could have become. And they're very, and some of them are like very different from each other. And they're, some of them are jaded and some of them are, they have like all these different things weighing on them or that have influenced their behavior in ways that are like antisocial or whatever. And it's trying, I guess, trying to show you like, but they could also be like pure and innocent and good. And that's kind of what some of the like clone characters really are, um as opposed to the characters that you see. So like it's a nice contrast, even if the young, like the clone characters aren't always that interesting. um
Yeah, I do think that makes sense, like on kind of just like this like macro plot level. But to go back to like Zach's point about like that kind of like macro thematic level, this is ultimately like a story where like at the end, like it really tries to sell this moral. Like Inaba, like the pop star even says at like some point, like humanity, it's like all about humanity, like not technology.
mhm.
But like for an ending that's really trying to like hammer that point home, like I just hadn't felt enough humanity behind like the actual like clone characters, at least not like most of them. Like ultimately, like what you end up seeing and experiencing for a lot of this game, and especially a lot of the second half, is like a lot of just like kind of sci-fi tropes and like melodrama between the characters that I don't know, it just like it didn't like manage to make me invested enough in the characters to really make that like ending like hit home like thematically. And then like the fact that like everybody gets like this happy ending at the end despite like all the questionable behavior that you see throughout the storyline, like especially like someone like Ida. Like I don't know, it felt like a little bit underwritten and off from like an emotional kind of standpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think too, like this idea, I think where I take the most issue with it is in this idea of like the representation of like these AI that are inside the simulation, that are interacting with them, that are ostensibly like there just to like help them form their personalities and like learn like about human culture and also how to interact and like recreate humanity, I guess, in a way. But they become like so attached to them like as people that then they like imply that like, oh well, we're going to like utilize the technology that grew us as clones to then like produce the people that are AIs inside the simulation. And it's like, I don't know. That just seems like a very strange, like, way to take it. Like, I get that they became
Yeah.
attached to some of the characters, but that are in there, like Miwako, for example, would be like the main one. I feel like that is who they're like attached to, or Okino, because I guess Okino kind of got stuck in um that the simulation and has no like physical body or whatever. But outside of like a couple characters like that, it's like I don't know that I really buy into that being like the ultimate goal. And that is also like kind of conflicting with the whole like Adam and Eve like repopulate the earth thing, you know?
Yeah.
So, uh, and it's a weird, it's like a weirdly positive outlook on like both the potential of AI technology and like the humanity of AI, um, which is interesting, like where we're at now with like in the real world, like AI technology and things like that. Like it's a oddly rosy picture of that entire like concept, I think.
Well, and I think that it ultimately ends up being very rosy in general. I think one of the things that's interesting to me too is that, like, I mean, like, because this loop isn't good. I'm never 100% clear on this. I think again, there's some indication that this is like the 300th loop, but they figured out 2 loops ago how to make Sentinels, and they've sort of been working towards this as like the outcome for a couple of times. But all 13 of the protagonists are like good, nice people, right? And that seems a little odd when a lot of them weren't originally. And I know that like we're talking about sort of this concept of nature versus nurture, right? Like
Mhm.
you have like sort of this idea that there is sort of parts of us that are fundamental and parts of us that aren't, and some of that is handled very well. I think we talked about this pre-recording. I think Hijiyama and Okino's love story is actually like the best one in the game, which good
Mhm.
job, Vanillaware. I'm proud of you. That was like really, I was actually very kind of moved by their relationship a couple of times, which I wouldn't say often. But my point is like for like everything just to kind of turn out like great at the end, like, oh, it just in this loop it just happens that all 13 of these kids are like good, nice people. Like that probably wouldn't work out that way, right? It's just like it seems like it kind of wants to like sort of ham fist in some of its themes without really in some ways earning them, because I'm like, uh, none of these people are like bad people, and even like someone like Ida is basically like, well, he had his reasons, right? Like, well, his reasons were like about controlling a woman. So I don't know.
And
I
creating
mean,
like
I
a
yeah,
teenage version of her to be like a perfect version of her. It's
yeah,
really weird. Like super
Yeah,
yeah.
weird.
I mean, I do think that like that doesn't bother me, like the clone aspect and that they're all good people, like these like because I think that what they're really trying to get at, like I think they're showing you the like failures and excesses and flaws of a lot of these characters in their different iterations. And then they're showing you, well, these clones, while they might have their DNA, they are like completely different people. And because of the experiences that they have in this loop, that is what makes them like good people, right? Because they finally figured out how to like come together and like work together and cooperation. And like I think that is actually like a really powerful message, like the idea that your genetics do not dictate your life, and that if you're given the right environment and you provide like just human beings in general with the right environment and the right social connections, then then almost everyone can like flourish and be like a pro social person. Like that I think is like a really good thing message that the game is sending. And I think it that is made more effective by like showing you how far off of that path some of these characters had gotten. But I agree that like giving like some of the other characters like the previous versions like happy endings is kind of like I don't know, that kind of conflicts with that a little bit, I think. That idea, right? Like you're supposed to like Amiguchi and Ida are like very different from each other. The Amiguchi that we have and the Ida from the past. And yet so it's like I don't really understand what the value is in like rewarding that past Ida who like almost completely just like destroyed the entire plan for his own like selfish reasons. Um but I do like that the clone characters, like, I think that that aspect of it, that, like, the nurture is more important, I think that really works, and that I did think, like, resonated with me, overall.
Yeah, I think that the plot ultimately works, even like if it's like a little silly, but
Mhm,
yeah, I do also just like agree with Zach's point that like some parts just did not feel earned.
mhm,
Like the ending is ultimately written in such a way that nobody really has to face any consequences for what they did during the events of the game. Which as a player, it also felt like I was like a little bit undermined because like I've been doing stuff and seeing stuff like as these different characters throughout the entire time, and the fact that like even characters who seem like they might be like morally ambiguous or even like potentially like evil in some ways, like Megumi or Goto, like as you're playing through their campaigns, like the ending is just like the plot twist essentially just allows that all to kind of just like be forgiven and forgotten, like without any kind of follow through, and then everybody just gets to have their happy ending. And yeah, like the ending itself like works on some levels, but like I don't know, with all the like twists and turns and reveals, like I found myself like laughing a little bit more than like feeling emotions. And I don't know if that's like a good sign in terms of like effective thematic storytelling.
I mean, I think it decidedly is not. But I think part of that, because I wouldn't have felt that way with like the first 12 protagonists. Like I felt like I really, and I said this last time, like I think that like outside of Goto, which is what I'm getting to here, like I thought that like the way that they weaved in and out, and the way that the storytelling was sort of coming, I thought that pretty much the whole way through. Like I liked the characters for the most part by the end. I mean, Amaguchi was still a little annoying to me, but certainly better than where he came from. Um, and I really liked the twist that Yuki was really like originally in the original iterations like Natsuna's mom, and I thought the storytelling was really powerful, and like I think that it could have really gone somewhere, but then like a lot of the air gets taken out of the tires during Goto's story, and then into the end where it just becomes this enormous dump of information, and then it's like all this really cool storytelling, and I like the way it's being done, and then like info dump, info dump, info dump. Now we're happy. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's part of the issue with it. I think I said this pre-recording, but Goto literally during his route has I think Ben called it a lore book where he's like reading it to us, and it's like they had like all this lore, and they're like, we don't really know how to do this, so we're just going to kind of do it this way. And I think that takes some of the air out the tires.
Yeah, it's such a narrative crutch to have Goto's like storyline basically just be entirely exposition dump, and like even though it's like framed interestingly like as a back and forth and kind of battle of wits between him and like the old professor Morimura, which is like an interesting framing. Like it's definitely not just like a really boring exposition dump, right? But it still is ultimately an exposition dump, and that's kind of a shame too because I feel like Goto gets like the least development of all the characters, and he is kind of like an integral character to the plot. And so like him being so like underdeveloped in terms of his personality and everything is kind of a, major, I feel like, flaw with the storytelling. And it's also just like that's just not that narratively, I feel like, satisfying to have like I don't know, 45% of the actual background of what's going on just be delivered in that format, when they were so good at, like, leaving the breadcrumbs, and interweaving the breadcrumbs between each character's story so well with the other characters. It's just kind of like I mean, it feels like they kinda got backed into a corner, and then they just, like, were like, "Oh, we have to do it this way or else none of it's gonna make sense."
Yeah, well, it's because they wanted to make everything feel so like mysterious and
Yeah.
exciting throughout all the characters' storylines, and for the record, like they succeeded on that level. Like again, like I think last episode I called this like kind of like a page turner, and it was pretty much to the end, like where I always wanted to see what was coming next. I was always
Mhm.
excited to jump into the next character's story and like see how it intertwines. Like it's a lot of fun in the end, this plot, but it's also just like silly in a way that doesn't make it the most resonant thematically or emotionally for me. Like
Mhm.
and even to go back to like Goto, like when you're seeing him like in the other characters' storylines throughout the game, because you don't unlock his most of his until like the very end for obvious reasons. Like the game's clearly trying to lead you on to think like to not trust him, and like to not really like him. I hated Goto until like the end of the game where I finally like got his storyline, but like it didn't like follow up on that kind of hatred. It kind of just like once all the plot twists and lore dumps happened in his plot line, I kind of just like was like I kind of just forgot about it because like there's all this other stuff to think about. So it's like and this is where I feel like the storytelling is the most frustrating, even when it's fun. It's also just kind of like leading you on into like thinking things that it then just like reverts and backpedals on in a way that doesn't make the most sense.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I feel like there are a lot of, like you're saying, Alex, like there's a lot of red herrings in the game that don't really make sense with the reveal at the end. And like whether or not those things are extremely important, like I don't think most of them are that important, like to the overall plot or the overall like themes or whatever. But because so much of the reveals that the game doles out to you are then revealed to be like red herrings that don't actually really matter, that also impacts like the satisfyingness of the mystery, because like a lot of the like m- the details that you uncover by the end, it's like, oh, that didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
You know, and they're treated like really big reveals, and then by the end of the game you're like, oh well, like who cares about that? And I do think too, like some of the reveals, like some of them are funny, or some things like I'll give an example. So the main reason why this like whole Deimos thing is happening is because Okino was like is the one who's like the programmer, that like the software engineer developing the simulation. And Okino is like, I guess, lazy, or like in an act of defiance, like uses leftover, like reuses code from a video game in the simulation, and that is basically the entire reason why the events of the game are happening, and like why the Deimos are coming and like invading the simulation, which is, it's funny, and it's like it's kind of an interesting like meta thing, like like referencing video games and referencing the way that like I think video game logic like also influences like software and technology, which I think we
Mhm.
see a lot in like real life all the time. And obviously, since Vanillaware are game developers, that makes sense why they would bring something like that in. But it's also like this is kind of like a stupid plot point in some ways. It's like, oh, so like the entire reason like this is happening is because Okino was just like, screw this, I'm just gonna put some video game code in the simulation. It's like,
Uh,
I don't
I mean,
know.
so I just want to clarify because I just genuinely curious. Like, so I know that Shinonome is the one who sort of like twisted the code to make it work against them. Because I thought for some reason that
Yeah,
Okino then he uses that video game code to then create the
that's
Sentinels to then
correct.
fight
That's
back. Okay,
correct.
okay,
Yes.
okay.
And yeah, so essentially the Deimos, like the thing that they get into with the nanomachines and like the calling basically it's like causing the Deimos to spawn, right? And so that is the thing that Shinonome did. Is she figured out that he used this code from the video game, and then basically engineered a way for the existence of the or the to activate this code within the personalities of the clones, to then cause that game code to like start functioning like it would in the video game and just endlessly respawn the enemies. So it's not that Okino like intended to have that happen. Like it is definitely like a she's exploiting something that he did, but it's still like it's like very, I guess in some ways it makes sense. It's very human, right? Like to do something like that, like to be careless in that way. But it's also just like, I don't know, it almost feels like kind of a like an ass pull in some ways too, if that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so and like so like the present day Okino is also like essentially wants to um like hack the Daimos simulation, and like the way he explains it is like it allows the like it will allow them all, like the Sentinels, to earn like the meta chips, which are
Yeah.
basically like our upgrade points in like destruction mode, that essentially allows us to like rebalance the game, is the way like they phrase it. It's very like meta in that sense. So it's just like, oh, like hacking the code to like have like this equipment improvement system that we've been tinkering with in the destruction mode, and like that's what gives our characters like a real shot at beating the Daimos, because otherwise like the
Mhm.
odds are like completely stacked against them. And
Yeah, like
I did,
Okino is doing like game development on the fly,
yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
And yeah, it's silly as hell, but considering what like how destruction mode is integrated into the game, I actually thought that was like a pretty fun twist.
It's
Um
clever. It's a
yeah,
very
yeah.
clever way to contextualize that stuff. Yeah. 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 Actually, Alex, now that you talking about this makes me think, and this I think is what you were getting at too, Zach, is I don't even know if the issue is that like Okino reuses video game code into the simulation, because that is also something I feel like that is that I'm not a programmer, but I think it's common with programming, like reusing code from other things and repurposing it, and that's just something that kind of happens. And it's silly, but it's not the most unrealistic thing. I actually think the problem is more Ryoko's motivations behind doing it,
We
and
don't get
they don't.
nearly enough of her perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they basically what they say is like, "Oh, she's just kind of fallen in despair and wanted to destroy humanity and didn't think humanity deserved to continue." And it's like there's no real justification for why she would feel that way
Yeah. I
at
mean, you get a
all.
recording of her saying like the Ida betrayed her or, something like that. And that's about it. And I actually think that, as we've been talking, I've been thinking about like, because like where, why am I not as invested here? And I think that part of it is like, we're talking about this sort of nature versus nurture thing, right? But I think a really good example of this is the very end of Karabe's story. You discover that the original Izumi saved Megami. Basically, like
Mhm.
he was like her dad was trying to bring her onto the ship, I believe, and it's like, no, you can't come in because you might be infected with nano machines. And he's like, no, I will sacrifice myself if something's wrong. I will take care of this. And I was like, dang, like that surprised me. I thought that was like a really cool plot
Yeah, that
moment.
was
Like that
good.
was like
Mhm.
maybe, and that was the first story I finished. Like I would think it was like the moment where I was like, whoa, that's really cool. That's
Mhm.
really interesting. And it was also for me like a really big sort of like opened up sort of the floodgates of what was going on here. But like, I don't feel like I really know those original characters very well. It's like very, very brief snippets here and there. And I think one of the things that probably would have improved things, and I know that's not really part of the way the game is done, is like instead of the lore dumping from Goto, like just give us like more of these characters in 2188,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of
Mhm.
them are really interesting. And then that might then kind of make that connection they have to their clone like a little bit more powerful. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud here.
I was just gonna say, like, cause we've been talking about like how like the characters from like that we actually experience, the clones, the ones that we embody, are like a little bit too perfect, is what we said. And like their original versions, the 2188 versions, are like decidedly very imperfect. And I
Mhm.
think like just being able to like show more of those characters like would help the game's overall themes hit a lot better, is if we saw like a lot of flawed humanity alongside a lot of this kind of like, more nurtured sort of humanity that we get in the clones. Like I honestly thought that's where the game was gonna go. Like it was slowly introducing us to the 2188 versions, and then I thought like for like the last leg of the game, maybe we were gonna like be able to like play as them a little bit more and things like that, and actually get to know them and their motivations beyond like what honestly, like, what we get from their motivations for most part is just, like, they end up doing a really stupid choice because their romantic interest, like, betrayed them or something or made them feel bad. Like,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
if that's what it took for Shinonome to, like, basically genocide humanity, is that, like, Ida didn't notice her senpai, like, that's just, like, that's not good writing.
Yeah, and I think what you guys are getting, like, I think Zach, like what you're saying is right. And there is one example I think where you do get a lot of that, and that's Natsuno and Miura, because you see a lot of interaction between them that's not even necessarily directly plot related, but shows like their bond and their relationship, and then also their relationships to other
Yeah.
characters
And not
in 20.
coincidentally, I think they're like two of the best characters and the second best romance.
Yeah,
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 agreed.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of that is because you see like normal character interaction and personality and development of their relationship and their relation to other people in 2188. And then you also get that in the simulation with the clones too. And so that is like there's a through line between them in the future, well, the past, I guess, but the future, and then the way the clones are now. And that is like almost entirely missing from all the other characters. And I think you're totally right. Like that's a huge problem with trying to connect these things. And I think some of that is just because there's so many characters. Like I think the only instance that you see of Hijiyama in 2188 is the one time he shows up and he's like, I think supposed to be like a security officer or the military guy who's like in charge of security on the like space station, the project they're on. And then he's talking about his relationship with Okino, and he's like, basically he was like defending them essentially, and then he like is basically dying, right? But then he's like leaving a message for Okino or whatever. But that's the only time, and like that's powerful because it shows that they had a romantic relationship in that time period, and then that connection is pulling through with the clones. But like that's the only time you see him in 2188. And so like I have no idea what he was like in that time period, other than that he and Okino had a relationship. And like a lot of the characters I feel like are like that, where you see them one or two times in that time period and that's it. And that's a huge, I just feel like that's a huge problem with the narrative of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, because the other thing we get from him at that point is that like he killed Izumi, I think.
Hmm.
Like, and because like
Or no,
Izumi,
was it Izumi or is it Sekigahara?
um,
I
I
guess.
from what I
No, I
remember
think
in that
95% sure
sequence,
it was Sekigahara. I
okay,
think.
yeah. Because
that
Sekigahara was the one.
Hijiyama killed Sekigahara.
Yeah, because he killed Chihiro, right? I think. I
Or
I can't keep it straight.
Oh my god, yeah, I'm not
well,
sure because like
I'm looking at the notes document. You have
okay.
under Hijiyama that he kills Izumi and Ogata after they kill Okino. And like I thought that was the other
That could be
thing we
right.
learned in that
That could be right.
Yeah,
flashback.
okay. No, that's
Yeah.
probably right. 'Cause
That
but
he
this
kinda
is,
went
I was looking at
crazy,
the internet when I
yeah.
was putting these notes together, so that's probably correct.
yeah. But that's kind of what I think too is like yeah, so you have like Sekigahara is like a hitman, right? And that's like
Yeah.
he was going to kill Morimura and then
Yes.
so it, but that's I think too gets to this point is like it's you you have all these characters that are kind of like occupying similar roles, but then they have no development. Like, why is Sekigahara a hitman that's killing Morimura? We really don't know.
Exactly.
Why is Izumi killing the other people in the program? We don't know. Like, who knows? And so then there's like no through line to that where it like makes sense with their characters and then they become like interchangeable in this way. That's why it's easy to mix them up because they're just kind of stand-ins for plot things that happen, not really full characters.
In fairness, like I feel like we've been kind of negative about the way a lot of these things come together in the very end, but like as I said before, I still like I found myself really compelled by a lot of like sort of the point to point storytelling. I thought was really good. I ended up liking Megumi's story a lot more than I thought I would, mostly because I like 426 as a character so much.
Hmm.
I think 426 is just really, really, really interesting, which again I guess is one of the not one of the protagonists, is being one of the most interesting characters, and like just sort of the way his attitude is like sort of split when he's like playing these different characters. Like when he's the British cat, he's like sort of has like a certain vibe to him, but it's also very different from the way that he acts when he's Shiba, who again, I found that twist very compelling. I had no idea that he was going to be like a Sixth Sense thing. Spoiler alert for Sixth Sense, I guess. Sorry, everybody. um, so I think that like some of the storytelling within the other 12 routes is still like really, really good, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I agree, Zach. I think we were talking about like the red herrings and some of them falling apart once you actually get to the end. But I actually think one of those misdirections that works really, really well is everything with 426. Like
Mhm.
they spend a lot of time suggesting that Sekigahara is 426, and a lot of the characters spend most of the game thinking that he is. And then when it's revealed he's not, and that 426 is actually Izumi, like a version of Izumi that's like basically in the code and like influencing all these other characters. I think that reveal is like really well done and it makes sense why the other characters think it would be Sekigahara, also based on maybe the knowledge some of them have of who he was in 2188. And then also like the reveal that 426, like you think he's like this villain and that he's getting in the way, like he's trying to destroy everything or whatever, and then that he's actually like the one that's enabling them to succeed essentially, is like a really powerful reveal. And I think that mystery is one that like where all the misdirections and all the kind of details that they build up like really pays off in a way that some of the other ones don't.
Yeah, because like the way we're like introduced to Sekigahara, it almost seems like he's like the most of a rebel. He's the most like kind of just like on his own, fighting the man, like doesn't really remember everything, but has like a clear directive. And then like the other thing we learn about him is that he's actually similar to Shinonome, just like kind of being used because of the drugs he's taken. So he's actually just losing his memory, which makes him like a tool of the man, even though as he like is under the impression that he's like fighting against the powers that be. So I thought that element was also really, really good and well executed in this story.
Yeah, and that I think too, like the entire thing with like Izumi, the Juro Izumi as like the 30 whatever year old, and then Chihiro Morimura when she's like 30 years old, and their whole like thing together. I thought that that was actually pretty well handled, and their romance between those two characters who I guess are like AI in the simulation at this point, that I actually thought worked a lot better than most of the other romances in the game. Because even though you don't see a lot of them necessarily together, you get this sense of like them experiencing so many things and having all of these really like dire moments where they kind of pulled each other along and like supported each other, and that really comes through at the end, which I thought was pretty well executed and really interesting. I was like that I almost feel like the game could have ended with them kind of being together in the simulation still, and then not had the like happy endings for all the rest of the simulation parts, or even the characters returning to the simulation. Like I feel like that would have been a better way to end that, right? Like at
Hmm.
least they got to be together, and at least they did succeed in their goal, which was to give humanity like another chance or whatever. But that's not what I mean. That is what happens for them, but then of course
Yeah.
there's all the other parts. But
Yeah, I mean
yeah,
that is the very final scene, right? Like
yeah,
in the epilogue is
yeah.
those two like as the younger selves together, which I thought was a nice touch.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that worked, and you do get a sense that they have suffered and sacrificed like a ton
Yeah.
for the goals, even though you're not really necessarily getting that from a lot of the other future characters. But theirs, I think, really worked well.
Yeah, I mean, like the dream slash flashbacks with them in like the first half of the game were one of the best hooks I think to like get me like really intrigued in the storyline. So the fact that they're able to follow through on it quite well was nice.
Mm. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense, even though you think that they're helping you, and then you think that they're against you, and then by the end you reveal that it revealed they're helping you again. And I think that that was just like really well done, like always keeping you on your toes, and you're not sure. And he does come off as like kind of evil or malicious in a lot of ways, especially when he's like the cat, right? Or those later parts of Juro's story where he's Shiba and he's trying to get your memory to like wipe again or whatever. um, but I feel like that he kind of earns that because you've seen also all the things that he's gone through. And so it's like he just ends up being like a very complicated and like interesting character in that way, that he's like capable of like all this misdirection and this like subterfuge and using people in that way, but it's all for this one goal, which is ultimately like noble.
I will just say, like, there was like like overall Remembrance was a really good time for the most part, despite like some of the reservations we've been talking about with the ending. I will say that there was like a kind of like a period, I want to say somewhere between like 50% and 70% of completion that like all of the kind of because we were talking in the first episode about like how cool it was how like all of these different storylines had their own kind of like distinct tone and sort of like references being done. But then like in that kind of like segment of the game, I felt like everything kind of like turned a little bit mushy, like just like a mush of sort of events and explanations with like some twists just kind of being dwelled on a bit too long and repeated and over explained a bit. And like we talked about earlier in the first half, how like the narrative was just flowing perfectly no matter like who we were like choosing to go to next. And in that portion, like the 50 to 70%, I just felt like things were kind of just like a little stale and like it felt like it could have been flowing better. And I was just wondering if if you guys had the same sort of
Uh,
experience at that point in the story.
I think that's a fair way of putting it. I think a lot of times what ends up happening with the way the remembered stories sort of flow out is like they end up being very similar, right? So like, I don't know, I think about Hijiyama, for example, uh, having to like chase the cat around to get the money. And then, like the first time, I was an idiot and I went to the vending machine because I thought that's what I was supposed to do to like have the event trigger. And like it's funny that like I have to go find money to buy Yoki Pan every single time to get it going. Like I the bit was like funny, but then the bit wore on me a little bit as I'm just like running back and forth to screen after screen after screen, where I'm just kind of doing things in a like in Juros even to some degree. I feel like, it's like I'm in that room and I have to figure out the different way to trigger this, and like it goes that way or it goes this other way or this other thing happens, or I have to find a way to get Shiba not to follow me or blah blah blah. Anyway, so I think it's sometimes the way that like I think that maybe part of the reason why it feels mushy sometimes is because like the way that it's sort of like meted out is like very similar. And I'm sure one of the things that we haven't talked about is this game was like delayed forever, man. Like it got announced like I don't even remember when it got announced, like way before it was released. And I think that like some of these things, like what we're talking about here and also what we're talking about in terms of the ending, feels to me like you had this really compelling story. And I think that one of the things that frustrates me about the way the story is told, and especially the way the story is told at the end, is like I feel like there's a lot of potential here to do some really rich thematic things. Like I think that nature versus nurture thing could work really well, but like then it ends up sort of like getting sort of like it comes out in sort of a weird way sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, Zach. I think like, and I think Alex too. What you were getting at is like the unique feel or style of each character's story and path kind of falls away because the stories all start to really converge on one another, and so it stops feeling like you're playing like a unique take on each story or each perspective, and then starts to feel like it's all the same story, which
Mhm.
in some ways I guess is good, right? Because everything's converging and coming together and like making sense in some way, but it does lose some of the stylistic elements that made each path or the storytelling in each person's storyline unique from one another. I do think that that kind of falls away. And then I think too, Zach, what you're getting at is kind of like that probably is somewhat a consequence of like the prolonged development and having to make everything come together. And I do think like the end of the game ends up focusing way more on making everything come together in a way that makes sense and less on some of those stylistic flourishes and things like that that were interesting at the beginning. And maybe it doesn't need those things towards the end because you're getting a lot of reveals and and that's when a lot of the thematic elements come in, but it does kind of lose something in that transition towards the end, I think.
Yeah, and like once we get like enough information about like the different twists that are happening, like I thought it like picked up again
Hmm.
until the end, where like I have some things I like about it, some things I didn't like, as we've been talking about. But yeah, it just felt like somewhere in that like third quarter, like felt like 5 hours of the game probably could have been trimmed without losing much.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, overall, still had a very good time. Still was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. I think too, like the game, there's a lot of things like the game, even though it's like at the end is so focused on kind of rushing, like not rushing, but like just getting you into the conclusion and giving you all these details and kind of opening up what's actually going on. There's still like a lot of funny character moments and like things like that. Like they don't entirely lose the ability to kind of do that. Like one thing that comes to mind is in one of the final battles. Um, Denji, confesses to Tomi that, like, he, likes her or whatever, and
Yeah,
then
I like that part.
yeah, and they're all like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, we're in the middle of a battle, and, like, everyone can
Yeah.
hear this." And and he's like, "Oh, this is what they do in the movies, so I thought it would be, like, the right thing to do." And they're like, "No, man, that's messed up." And then Juro is like, "Oh, well, I thought it was cool, Denji." And he's like, "Dude, that makes it
Yeah.
worse." It's, like, so funny and such a, like, good like character moment for all those characters, like that kind of shows their personalities. And I think before we had talked about like kind of finding the dialogue in the battle scenes like ancillary, or not that interesting because a
Mhm.
lot of it was like tutorialization. But I think they did a really good job in the later battles of like having a lot of those kind of character moments in there that made them a little more compelling narratively than they were before,
Yeah, they're
which I
also
like.
like I felt like there was it just me or was there a moment where like it felt like Iori was having like a sexual awakening when Yuki was like mending her, like touching her hand or something? Like what, did anybody else pick up on that in the
I,
destruction segments?
I did not catch that. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just didn't catch it.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, Alex. It's like because especially because like Yuki is a very, I don't want to say like masculine, but like just a like not like, I guess some in some ways like gender non-conforming character. Like it's like almost like the same reason like she's attracted to like Sekigahara.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of cool like badass like step in and be the hero kind of thing. Like it just like it's like kind of suggests she's like attracted to that more than necessarily like gender, right? Which kind of is like an interesting thing. And of course Hijiyama and Okino's story also has those elements. So there is, and I think I don't know if that's because this is like there is elements of like transhumanism to this story, right? And like the idea of like personality and like who you are as a person being more than just your physical body. So they're kind of getting into that a little bit, I guess. And I do think those elements are actually handled pretty well in the game, surprisingly, especially for Vanillaware, where especially George Kamitani, who's had a lot of controversies in the past over his like conduct and like things that he puts in his games that are kind of like sexist or whatever. I was really shocked to see some of that, that it approached those subjects and handled them pretty well. Um,
Yeah, Miss Morimura is the only character ultimately who breasts boobily throughout the game.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
yeah,
And
pretty
she
good
ends up
work
being one
overall.
of the more interesting characters
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and
I mean,
like
I feel like every version of Chihiro is like really distinct too. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like they're all really, I think they're all really compelling characters because ultimately, like the nurse version of it is like compelled by trying to, uh, kind of recreate Izumi and herself as they go forward into, out of the simulation is the idea. And, uh, you know, she dies obviously before she's able to do that. But I think that like it's very different from what the professor's trying to do, from what Iori's trying to do, even though
Mhm.
Iori's the most boring version.
Yeah, I think too, like there's interesting elements like that Goto was like had this kind of like the old version of Goto and the old version of Morimura, like he had this kind of like unrequited like love or attraction to her that like motivated some of his decisions in like 2188. And like the idea that like Chihiro is like older but still kind of has that like that sexual magnetism, I guess, is like interesting for this game. Like, oh, like we're portraying like a 70, like 60, 70-year-old woman, but she still like has that like power over these men. It's like
Mhm.
that's an interesting thing. It's not something I would have ever thought like Vanillaware would do because they seem so focused on like this particular like youthful or like whatever kind of beauty thing. But then to do that, I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting subversion in some ways of what I would expect out of them. And like that these characters at every stage in their life, they're like carrying over these kind of aspects of themselves. I thought that was kind of interesting. I actually just think in general, like the I don't know if you want to call it like gender, sexual politics or that aspect of the game got better and through at the by the end, and I was really
Oh, for sure.
surprised by that. I really thought like a lot of the more sexist or just like more
Like
exploitative
fan
tropes,
servicey, yeah.
yeah, that all like falls away, and then and what's left is like a really interesting examination of like people's relationships to one another and why like a romance develops and like those kind of things. Like it just ends up telling a much more interesting story around that, which I just
Mhm.
did not see coming based on the kind of juvenile things that the game was doing at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I can fully justify all the juvenile things that are doing in the early going, but I think for the most part, at least they are trying to make there be a reason for it, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like even like the stuff with Megumi, which is annoying in terms of the way that she handles Juro.
Hmm.
Uh, it's like the fact that like the original iterations of these people, like he saved her. I was like, that's really cool. I also wanted them to do more with that. But that's really cool.
Mhm.
And so I think that yeah, I mean, the way that it sort of like filters things into like a trope, but like there's like sort of like this thing that sits over it, sort of creates it. It's sort of an interesting way of looking at like even the way that art is sort of constructed, right? And yeah, I think that to me that's like the most fascinating thing about the way this narrative is rolled out.
Mm. Yeah, and it's surprising that this game shows like a really well done like gay relationship that then it is good gone through multiple iterations and is like compelling in each iteration, and that there's like these kind of connections between characters that do survive through like the simulation and survive through the clones, and then some that don't at all, right? Like there, even though like Ida is so motivated by like recreating like this version of Kisaragi, the version of Ida, Amiguchi and Kisaragi, like in the clones, they have no real romantic connection and are completely like attached to somebody else entirely. And like I think it's interesting that there's reasons why some of those things carry through and some of those don't. And I think that kind of gets away from the tropiness in a way, because you would think like, oh, the trope is like, oh, it's like this love across time and space that's always going to be there. But it's like, no, for some of these characters it is, and then for some of these characters it's not. And I think they chose the right ones to carry through and then chose the right ones to abandon too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like at first, like I was pretty, and like I mean, I didn't mend it completely, but I was pretty frustrated with like how forced a lot of the romantic relationships were, aside from like the few that we like discuss as exceptions in terms of like being quite well written. But the fact that they did use it as like a narrative device to clearly separate the clones from their original versions as individuals, I think is a clever way to do it, and work it in like to more meaningfully add to like the plot.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I do think like I think Dingy and Tomi's relationship, like I think that one's develops pretty well. Natsuno and Miura, which we
Yeah,
talked
it's
about,
cute. Yeah.
those are good, and Hijiyama and Okino, like I think those are good. So it's not, some of the romances I think work, um, and even to some extent, like Megumi and Juro, I think it's a little, it's very like typical Hollywood kind of romance kind of thing, I guess. Like there's not a lot of depth there, but like it's fine. Like it's fine. It's executed fine.
Yeah,
Um,
I just didn't love that one because it felt like another case where like the game was just misleading me to think something different. Like I
mhm.
don't know if you guys got the impression that like Juro just hated Megumi throughout like the entirety of his story pretty much, but that's kind of like what my
I mean,
impression
it's the
was.
way he sort of portrayed during her story in particular, I think. But then once you realize that he's sort of like, I don't know, messed up, it becomes a little
Yeah.
more clear as to why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree
And
with
like
Zach. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, ultimately like it resolves, but it's like I just felt like another like misled again, and then it's just like, oh yeah, actually everything's happy. Yeah, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like what Zach's saying is like her perspective, because I think she also has like a lot of like anxiety and like self consciousness about herself, which is why she's so easily manipulated by the by 426. So it's like from her perspective, I think she's seen him like dislike her. But when you're from his perspective, I think it's less that way, right? Like you're getting more. It's more. Though I don't, I agree with you, Alex. I don't think they fully like set it up and develop it the way I would want. I do think that part of that is just a difference in perception between the two characters of each other. Like she's perceiving, oh, I'm like some of it's her guilt. I think that's coloring how she views their interactions versus his interactions with her.
Yeah, and
Um,
and the other part of it from his perspective, I think, is like because of his dreams, he's worried he's gonna like hurt her or something at the
mhm.
same time. Yeah,
Yeah, so he's trying to keep her at a distance. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, But yeah, and I do think that is too something that is really something really cool about the storytelling in this game, that they are able to, like, I do think that each character has a very unique perspective, and the way they view events and like the way you see the events through their eyes is very distinct from one another. and I think that's very hard to do with like 13 different characters. It's like almost like, I don't know, like Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones kind of style, where you have all these POV characters, and they're all giving you like a different view of the same world and these same events, and
Yeah.
that works pretty well.
This is definitely better than the ending of that TV show, so it's got that going for it. Well, one other thing I do want to address, we haven't really talked too much about it, but it's like a big part of the game, right? Is the RTS elements. We haven't kind of talked through how they work, and we talked a little bit earlier about the way that the storytelling, I think, gets a little better during those, and I think actually some of the coolest character interactions
Mhm.
happen during that. And actually, like they would be like, you remember like when we were 8 and we did like XYZ, and these are characters who basically haven't interacted, throughout
Mhm.
the remembered
Mhm.
stuff, which also made me like want to see more of their childhoods. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
Ogata, when you see like him as an 8-year-old, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like it's just, I know why they do it the way they do it, but like I wanted to see more of that. But like I actually thought that the RTS stuff became like pretty hard. Not hard, you know what I mean? But like I couldn't S rank immediately. I actually died
Mhm.
once, which was like crazy. I died at some point, and apparently this actually got patched. Like the Switch version was released, and like they made it harder than the original one,
Oh,
and they
that's the version
rebalanced
I
some things.
played. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like and then the PS5 version, which is the one I played, also it was. I think all their other versions eventually got patched, so it's
Oh, okay.
actually harder than the original version. But like sometimes like I really had to think about like the layout of my characters. I had to think about like, okay, I really need to push out damage fast. Like there's a boss fight that's one I actually
Mhm.
died to, where I was like, I need to get him there fast. And think about how to like buff the characters. And I was like, okay, there's like some actual like it actually kind of forced me to engage with the RTS stuff.
Mhm.
And it wasn't again super hard. I wanted the platinum because I was so close to it. I was like, so I was like, I needed to S rank it because it's who I am. But yeah, I thought it was actually like kind of compelling in the last third.
Yeah, I think they did a really good, like the later sections of the combat components like were pretty interesting and like well designed in a way to like make you engage with it. I don't think it's that difficult to just pass, right? But I think to get a good rank, you have to really think about the mechanics and think about the options that you have with each character and your loadout and who you're bringing to the battle and all of that. Ends up mattering a lot more in the back half. And I did think like the final battle, I liked that they chose just like it's basically like a time limit, right? Like you just have to survive, and endless waves and waves of the Dimos are
Yeah, when
spawning.
Anaba said you're 50% of the way there, I'm like, I'm 50% of the way
Yeah.
there. What are you talking about? This has been going on forever. I didn't think I was going to survive.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
believe I survived that on my first try because I was in a very similar situation.
Yeah, and I did find like the ones where and I actually thought it was interesting they picked that for the last battle, because I found the ones with the bosses to actually be some of the easier maps, because the it ends when you kill like the gold enemy boss basically, right? And so I relied really heavily on the like first gen Sentinels, the melee ones. And so you could just like beeline straight to the boss, have two of them with their like demolition blades or whatever, and they can just like melt like a single unit like that. So those ones for me weren't that difficult, because like I just ignored all the like ads that they would spawn, right? Or the other mobs or whatever, and just immediately kill them, and then it's over then. But then that strategy did not work for the for the final battle, because it's all small enemies, and because you're trying to defend that central point, like one large enemy is actually a lot less threatening than a swarm of very small enemies surrounding the point and then hitting it really hard. Um, so I really like that, and I like that choice to like not have like a big boss enemy at the end, but just have waves and waves of unending enemies. It was cool.
Yeah. And I think so for the most part with the boss thing, I agree with you, except for that the last boss fight. Because like if you got close, like and you didn't kill the boss like immediately, like it was like one-shotting my characters. So like
Oh
I had to really
yeah.
sort of like think about how I was gonna lay that out. But yeah, like a lot of times I had to think about like how am I going to deal with the enemies, because I would always have enemies on the edge just sort of like shooting missiles in
Oh, the
over and
missile.
over and
Yeah,
over again.
yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like, okay, like it makes me want to play Unicorn Overlord, I guess is my overall point, because I was like, this is like this is like actually like pretty good. Like it was,
Hmm.
I figured it out. It because the game had been so easy up to the third wave. Like I feel like I had like a good sense of what was powerful in different ways. Yeah, I thought it was good.
So, did you guys know that you could go when you're in the customize menu, that if you go to the left, that you can also like increase their like
Yes,
base stats? I had
that
no
that opens up
idea.
at the end of the first wave, I think.
I had
Yeah,
I
no
believe
idea that
so,
was a
yeah.
thing until the very end of the game. I thought you could only upgrade their weapons, so I didn't do any of that stat upgrading until like the very end because I
stat
had no
upgrading is
idea.
like not that powerful.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't
Like you
seen
only
it
get
affect too much.
I
yeah,
didn't have any problems without doing it, but it was just like, oh, there's like a whole nother mechanic that I didn't even realize was there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also felt like the challenge level was much better balanced. Like I was still on intense when I started the second wave. Is that what it's called? And I definitely had to like start experimenting with new moves. For the third wave, I ended up putting it on normal just because I really wanted to finish the game on time, and things were like really starting to take a while on intense during the second wave. But in general, like, yeah, I just started having more fun with the game, like trying out different moves, trying out different like compositions of like what generation of Sentinels you're gonna take. Ultimately, like I really liked having one of the first gens. Usually Ogata was my guy. One second gen, I usually pick Juro, and then Tomi and Natsuno from third gen, and Megumi and Yuki for fourth gen. And like I thought like yeah, it just allowed like for some like interesting like personalization of like strategy that I really wasn't getting from the game from the first 50% of destruction. And like yeah, I would have like Megumi and Yuki being super mobile with the flying fourth gens to like deal with like things that were very out of reach. The third gen's great at like long range, and like ultimately I thought the regular battles felt a bit too samey, like to the point where I mean I was also crunching a little bit, but I was getting pretty tired of just doing them over and over. But having like some of the boss fights have like more kind of gimmicky premises, like especially the ones where you have to like essentially like traverse the entirety of the battlefield to get to the boss Deimos, I thought were really fun. And also shout out to that boss fight that has like Inaba singing her song throughout
Hmm.
the whole time. That was a vibe for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Alex, I agree. I think too, like the game does a really good job of starting once you're gotten further into upgrading each character, like distinguishing them from each other, so they actually
Yeah.
start to feel unique. So like I really like Natsuno because she has like the rail gun, but she has like the really wide rail gun,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
very powerful.
huge for the flying because there'll just be these big swarms of flying enemies, and then she can just like hit all of them in one hit. Or Tomi gets like an upgrade where she does like 2 railgun shots,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and that was crazy.
Yuki's
Or
quad leg spike is really
yeah,
powerful
the quad
too.
leg spike, yeah,
And
and
that's
she
all added, like, that was not on release, it was added to the Switch version and then added into
Oh,
other versions, like, they didn't have, like, unique skills,
Oh, that
interesting. Well,
add
that's a
that added
huge
so
change.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree, I agree.
Yeah, because like then Yuki is basically like as much of a melee bruiser as the first gen ones because she gets like the ceramic armor too, so she can take more hits. But she has the mobility of a flying unit, which is crazy. And Goto gets like the interceptors is like a thing that those flying ones can do, and he like gets a thing that makes him spawn way more. So you can just like sit him and just spawn interceptors like repeatedly, and then you get all these little drones like flying around, like helping. That helped with the missile spam a lot because they would
Yeah,
just
for
intercept all
sure.
the missiles.
It was
Uh,
so much easier to just deploy interceptors than like try
mhm.
to like keep EMPing or things like
Yeah,
that, setting up the anti-air things, which were always at like a weird angle, I found.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and like giving they gave Hijiyama like a demolition blade that hits air units, which is like takes like their one weakness away. So he was just like crazy the whole time. Or
Oh, and then
yeah,
Ogata's got like the wide range
yeah,
demolition
the
blades,
super
which are
wide,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is
You
really
could also, like,
useful.
superpower it too, so, like, it does double damage,
Hmm.
and then if you stack that on top of, like, one of those 5, I don't remember what they're called. basically like those 5 things that you can use throughout the fight that you have to charge for. Then
Hmm.
you like add
Oh, the
offense
meta
to that.
skills. Yeah.
The
Yeah,
meta
meta
skills, yeah,
skills.
yeah.
And then that was how I had to that was the only way I was able to S rank that boss fight was like by just like pumping as much as I could. Like I had someone close to him who buffed him, and then I used that buff, and then like he one shot at the boss. I was like, okay, I got it. But it took me
Yeah,
like 8 tries to S rank it. It took a while, and it was
it's a
on normal
doozy.
mode. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they did that. The fact that that was added later is crazy because that like added so much to the game, like making each character really distinct. Because that was part of my problem too at the beginning. Is I'm like, well, why would I use one over the other? They all have the same skill
Yeah.
set. Yeah. So giving them all like unique attributes is like just makes the game a lot more interesting and fun because you actually have to like consider why you're choosing one unit over another and what kind of team comp you're putting into the map and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interestingly in the end game, it was the part of the game I enjoyed the most
Hmm.
because I thought some of the other end game stuff was like, yeah, I didn't love it. So, which would not, if you had told me that when we recorded the last episode, I would have told you you're stupid. So, yeah, so sort of as a final note, I think both of these episodes have come off as maybe more negative than I intended in terms of the way that I feel about it. I think it's that the ending and the way the ending is pushed out, it sort of like it kind of left kind of a bad taste in my mouth for the way that it comes through. And like I just felt like when I got to the end, I was like, okay, that was a video game. Cool. And then I didn't think about it again until I was putting together the show notes last night. So it just doesn't, for me, because of the way some of the issues that we talked about, it doesn't have the staying power of other games that are doing similar things thematically or narratively. I know that if I go back and play it again, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna like see how a lot of these things come together a little bit easier. But I don't care enough to do that. So like I still like it. I think it's good. I'm glad I played it. Maybe my expectations were a little too high, but it was a video game, and I enjoyed it.
I'll be quick because I just want to say I feel the exact same way. Like those were exactly my impressions of the game. Really enjoyed my time with it. Was a little bit too silly and over the top by the end to really resonate with me, but like I thought it was really well put together and had a generally quite good time with it.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I think it just gets so bogged down in like the making the entirety of the plot come together and having so many characters is just I think so difficult to juggle that I think like actually making it come together in a way that kind of makes sense was such a monumental task that they kind of had to leave some of the characterization and thematic depth like to the wayside with the story. And that's kind of a shame and maybe like a good rule of thumb for like why you shouldn't have a game with 13 different characters and then other variations of those characters that you have to develop in like a 25-hour runtime. It's just like so hard to do. But it is like pretty impressive that they managed to do as well as they did with it. And the journey, I think, is a lot better than like the destination for this game.
Yes,
That's kind of
yes.
how I came away. Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, and I hate to make this comparison, but it's the truth. Like, it felt like sort of like the last half of this last season of Lost. You know what I mean? Like, I was a fan of Lost probably for longer than a lot of people. I'm not sure if you guys have watched it, but then like it just the way they wanted to pull things together. A lot of times, I thought were kind of unsatisfying. That's why the next show Damon Lindelof went on to make was The Leftovers, where he's like, I'm not interested in the answers. I'm interested in the journey, and I think that he learned his lesson on that, and I think that this is a good example of that. But I mean, like other times it's been done well. Like I don't want to spoil anything, but like VLR has a lot of those same things going on, right? In terms of, I don't want to get into even the specifics of it because I don't want to spoil Virtue's Last Reward for those who haven't played it. But like that's a good example of how you do it right. Of course, that game sort of ends on a cliffhanger that doesn't totally bring it together in the end. But yeah, it's good, but it has some cracks. Yeah, we are all pretty much in agreement on this. So yeah, I'm glad we played it. It's my first Vanillaware game. It will not be my last. I think my next one will probably be Unicorn Overlord, but whenever I
It's
get to it.
crazy that this is your first one, Zach,
Yeah.
because I feel like there's none of their other games are like this at all.
And that's okay. I mean, like
Yeah.
the look of it's just. I mean, we haven't talked about the look almost at all, but man, the look of it is just so beautiful.
Well, and that's the thing
And
too, is
yeah,
like I think the game, because there's so many of these, like the plot and the character elements and all these different things going on, like that almost like distracts in the visuals in a way.
hmm
Whereas I think the other games Vanillaware's made, like they give you more time to just sit and enjoy the like visual splendor that they're
hmm
providing you. And that is one thing I think about this game that makes it different than their others, is they don't there's only a few times where they do that, like where the characters are looking out over the sunset, over the cityscape, or
yeah.
you're riding on the motorcycle with Sekigahara
Hmm.
or Amiguchi and seeing the city go past. Like those are times where I was just like, wow, like this is really cool. And that kind of visual splendor and identity that Vanillaware is known for. But so much of the game is just like focused on other things, I guess.
Yeah, that shot on Sumire Bridge is so nice. Like we
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's
had like the
beautiful.
sky with
Yeah,
like the two different colors.
Hmm.
That was
yeah,
nice.
it
But
was stunning.
one more thing I want to mention, because I know we forgot to mention it at all last episode, even, is just the reason that this game works as well as it even does on like kind of a character emotional level is because of how well it's localized and how good the voice performances are. This is like one of the best dubs, English dubs I've experienced in a Japanese game like ever, and that's pretty much across the board in terms of this cast. Um, yeah, I think like the cast did an amazing job, and the localization feels very natural.
Oh, I think it's fabulous. I mean, I think that like on a like a moment to moment writing like perspective, I think it's fabulous. I think there's only maybe like one weak-ish link. I think that Tamao Karabe's voice actress is like kind of stiff, but other than that, like the dude who plays Fluffy, phenomenal, really fun, really good. The Kijiyama's great. The person who played Yuki, I thought did a great job. I think that the person who's playing Juro does a really good job of sort of modulating themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as I was listening, it wasn't like a lot of names that a lot of voices that I recognize necessarily, which usually, I play enough Japanese RPGs that I usually recognize a lot more people, but I didn't this time, and that was awesome because they were all great.
The one that really stood out to me, just like Morimura, I'm like, yeah, that's definitely Mitsuru. That is Mitsuru from Persona 3.
Yeah, I do think the localization in general too is very good. I don't really know. uh, I think like there's a lot of times where there's because of I feel like there's probably limitations on how much text they were able to put on screen because a lot of it is like essentially like text bubbles. It's not like presented in like a visual novel way where you can just have blocks and blocks of text. So it's all pretty much dialogue or internal monologue. And they do so much with the brevity. Like there's not an insane amount of text, but
Hmm.
every time the characters speak or every time they deliver an internal thoughts or talk to another character, like I feel like the economy of words, I guess, is what I'm getting at, is really well done. And I'd imagine that was very difficult when taking the game from Japanese to English to like maintain. And there was never a point where I felt like, oh, I'm missing something here, or they're not conveying something that was probably in the original. And I think with lesser localizations, you often do feel that, and I think it's a credit to the localizers at Atlas that they were able to pull all of that over so well, and it sounds so natural in English, both the voice acting and just the written dialogue between characters.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's a real strength of this game, and I'm glad you brought it up, Alex, because I would have forgotten about it again, and I think it's a really important part of why this game is actually good. Thank you both so much for playing this game. I know both of you had to kind of crunch it in the last couple of days, and I crunched it like as soon as we got done recording. I pretty much played like the last like 30% of the game like that night because I was very compelled by that. I know that probably people are listening to this who love this game and they're probably really not happy with us and the way we've talked about it. I'm sorry. It's just my honest opinion. I wanted to like it more, but I liked it a lot. So keep that in mind. So anyway, I guess that pretty much brings us to the end of our conversation. So we can talk about what's coming up next. So in 2 weeks, we have decided on this for sure, and actually all three of the current panelists will be there. We're going to be having an episode called RPGs That Deserve a Perfect Score. And I don't know exactly how that's going to look yet, but I was kind of thinking about it, and then Aleks put down like this very long list of like rules about it. I'm like, that's pretty much exactly what I wanted to do. Thank you, Aleks. But you put it together much better than me. So I think the idea is going to be that we're going to kind of bring them to the panel and say like, hey, we think this is a perfect game, argue it, and then at the end, perhaps we'll vote for one or multiple. I don't know exactly that deserve a perfect score, a 100. I wonder, Ben, are you gonna bring Chronicles across?
Yes, I
Okay,
will
good.
probably talk about it since
I
I
mean, I
did
hope
give
so,
it.
since you
Yeah.
actually gave it a 100.
Yes. So that'll be one of them, and then I don't know. I'll have to think if we
Yeah.
get to pick two. Maybe I'll think of another one. Yeah.
I'm trying really hard not to bring like my obvious choices that I talk about a lot, because someone I think appropriately pointed out recently that there's one game I talk about a lot, and it's fair. So I'm going to try to bring some other ones. After that, I don't know yet. It'll be a game journal. I have some ideas about what it might be yet, but I don't want to announce it because I haven't decided for sure what game we'll be playing after that episode. But I will know by the time the next episode comes out. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us, retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky, Twitch, YouTube. You can also join RPG Fans Discord. And then I'm, relatively active there, not as active as the previous host was, but if you message me there, I will see it. And I will talk to you. If you want to support us, we also have a shop. It's hosted by TeePublic. You can get to it on the website. They have like t-shirts, mugs, things like that. Very cool. We also have two other fine podcasts. One is Random Encounter, usually hosted by John Logan. I will actually be hosting the next episode of it. We're going to be doing the things got shuffled around in the schedule. We're going to be doing the 2025 year in review. So you will hear that from us. And I think that Aleks will be there as well. We'll be talking about some of our favorites from 2025. And then we also have Rhythm Encounter, which is all about RPG music. You can review us on Apple Podcasts, Overcast, wherever you're listening to us. We would love some reviews. It helps us sort of get to more ears. And let's talk about how to reach the individual panelists if you'd like to, starting with you, Ben.
Yeah, you can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
And Aleks.
You can email me at alexfranacek@gmail.com.
Awesome. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, ZachW@rpgfan.com is good. Probably Discord is probably where you'll get the response from me fastest, is ZachW. So, again, thank the two of you so much. I am ashamed of my words and deeds, but I'm not ashamed of you two. So thanks so much. And thank you, listeners. Good night and good luck.